As for AEW, Tony Khan doesn't seem too bothered by all the uncertainty around Warner Brothers Discovery and its future ownership. He has gone on a spending spree. But before we talk about who he has signed, we got to talk about who he did not sign. This one was a surprise only because of how sudden it was. Now, last week, I mentioned that Meltzer in The Observer had an item where he said that there was heavy interest from WWE in signing Powerhouse Hobbs, although he gave no indication of when his AEW contract might be up. And my response to that was, well, they should. They should have interest in Powerhouse Hobbs. And they should be very high on him. And Tony Khan would be very high to let him go and let him walk away. But you know what? Sometimes it ain't your call to make. But then as I was getting ready to go live on Wednesday after Dynamite, literally about to go live on YouTube, I see people in the chat talking about, oh, Hobbs is gone. Hobbs is gone. And news broke that Powerhouse Hobbs' contract was expiring at midnight. So he wasn't technically gone. He was still 90 minutes away from being gone. But that he would become a free agent. This was after AEW announced that the Ops would be defending their trios titles on Collision, which happened last night against Hangman Page and Jet Speed. This was slapped together in a backstage segment very quickly. It came out of nowhere on Wednesday. That all of a sudden Hangman and Jet Speed are going to be a team. So then they taped the match after Dynamite with the Ops, including Hobbs, losing the titles. In fact, Hobbs took the losing fall. He got rolled up and pinned by Kevin Knight. So at least they had somebody that they're clearly high on, and Kevin Knight, get the win for his team. Would have been easy to have Hangman win. So I kind of like that they had Kevin Knight get the pin. But he did the honors on the way out, and apparently he's leaving on good terms, but he is all finished up. And it is believed that Hobbs is on his way to WWE, although nothing has been reported about him actually having signed a deal with them yet. Fightful reported that despite ongoing contract negotiations over the past few months and a substantial offer to stay, Hobbs elected to test the open market. But there's only one other company that could possibly match what Tony Khan was offering him if Tony made him a substantial offer, right? I mean, who else is going to make him a substantial offer? Tony must have really thought he had a chance to re-sign him if he kept him on TV right up until the very end. It's very unlike Tony Khan to do that. Usually he would just bench somebody altogether if he knew they wanted to leave and go to WWE, right? He did that with Rey Fenix. He did that with Ricky Starks. He did that with Mariah May. But Hobbs worked there for 5 years, during which time he held the Trios title and the TNT title, although he didn't have the TNT title for very long. They stuck him in 4 different factions, 4, during that time. He was a member of Team Taz. He was part of QT Marshall's crew, which was entirely forgettable outside of him actually holding the TNT title during that run. He had it for a little over a month. Then he was part of the Don Callis family, which I think everyone has been a member of the fucking Don Callis family at one time or another. I may have to check my own birth certificate and see if I was a member of the Don Callis family. And then finally he joined the Ops. And there were flashes where you thought he was going to get that big push. He got the TNT title, but then he lost it shortly thereafter. I remember him really squashed Chris Jericho in a match on Dynamite. This was a few years ago by this point. And on commentary, I remember Taz making such a big deal, like that's a big deal, getting a win over Chris Jericho so dominantly like that. But then he ended up blowing out his knee. I don't know how much longer after that it was. It might have been a few months, but he blew out his knee in a match on TV against Jon Moxley. So when Jon Moxley had the IWGP title, and he disappeared for 6 or 7 months. And then at the beginning of last year, I remember that episode of Dynamite where he challenged Jon Moxley for the AEW World title. And I remember at the time, I even put it in the thumbnail for the review that night. I said, Tony Khan, what do you have to lose? What do you have to lose? And this was like in the earlier days of the Death Riders, in the immediate months that Moxley had won the championship where they were at their most insufferable. And it was just, I thought, terrible TV week to week. I actually find it easier to tolerate them now than I did at the beginning of last year. But I was like, man, Hobbs has some momentum here. He's going into this. He's getting a world championship match. What do you have to lose? Put the title on Hobbs. Give him the monster push. And what did they do? They beat him. Now, who knows? Had they gone a different way with him in that match last January, maybe he would still be working there. But they beat him, and he ended up as 1/3 of the Trios champs in the Ops. after Hook was out with a concussion. So he had matches with a lot of the top names. He wrestled Jericho. He wrestled Moxley. Not too long ago, right? He wrestled Hangman in that Falls Count Anywhere match. Even a couple of weeks ago, in that Lights Out match with Hook against Hangman and Swerve. But it always felt very start and stop with him. It was very hot and cold, very up and down. Like Tony never wanted to fully commit to pushing him any higher than he was. Like he was at that ceiling. He had reached his ceiling in AEW. That, and they have a gigantic roster with a lot of really talented wrestlers. They have a lot of wrestlers on that roster who are just objectively better than Powerhouse Hobbs. That doesn't mean that you don't use some of those people to help make Hobbs. He could have done that if he wanted to. He just elected not to. But because they have so many people, employed there, and they have so many names, like top names, there just wasn't any room for Hobbs in that top mix. Now, if you're Will Hobbs, you can understand his frustration with that. He probably felt the same way. Like, is this as far as I can go here? Because if Tony offered him a substantial pay raise and he still said no, then it wasn't a money issue. This is Hobbs taking a chance on himself that he can do better in WWE. And he's probably right. You can never be sure. I mean, Ricky Saints, who he was partnered up with in Team Taz, he's still down in NXT. Mariah May is still down in NXT, and so the jury is out on whether or not Blake Monroe is going to be a huge star on the main roster. She should be. But the jury is out. The jury is out on whether or not Ricky Saints, when he gets called up, what's his ceiling on the WWE main roster? Because he's on the smaller side. Is that going to work against him, right? Hobbs is a bigger guy. But Hobbs is also a bigger guy on a roster where I would say WWE physically has more bigger talents than AEW does. And so what's that going to look like for Hobbs? Is he going to look out of place? To me, Hobbs still looks like a beast, whether he's in AEW or WWE. But, it matters. It makes a difference. If you put him in the ring and stand him next to someone like Drew McIntyre, is he going to look the same as, if he's standing in the ring in AEW across the ring from fucking Speedball Mike Bailey? I don't know. And that could matter for some people. But clearly, this was not just an issue of you're not paying me enough, so I'm going to leave. He's like, I think that I could be doing better or I could be doing more. And so my contract is up. And instead of committing for another 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and locking myself into something where I may end up in the same position I am in right now, it's now or never. I'm not getting any younger, and I have to take that chance on myself that I could do better somewhere else. My thinking was that NXT could be a good starting point for him, especially now with the main roster raiding so many talents from Shawn Michaels. That has now opened up a lot of spots and a lot of opportunities for other people. They lost Obafemi, who was their biggest star, but they're already pushing Keanu Carver pretty hard. Hobbs, though, would come in with more experience and more polish on TV than someone like Keanu Carver. I think he'd be more trustworthy in a spot like that. He could work with Ricky. He could work with him. He could work against him and be a top guy in NXT. But then I look at the main roster. And so I went through the roster, and I want to just go over here how it looks right now in WWE. Okay, well, let's look at Monday Night Raw first. On Monday Night Raw, on the heel side, they're pretty loaded. They have Braun Breaker, Bronson Reed, Logan Paul, and Austin Theory. Okay, so all the members of the Vision. They have Gunther, Finn Balor, Dominic Mysterio, and Rusev, if he ever comes back. And on the babyface side, they have CM Punk, AJ Styles, probably Seth Rollins will end up as a babyface when he comes back, LA Knight, Penta, Rey Mysterio. And as I said earlier, it sounds like Obafemi is headed to Monday Night Raw. SmackDown, on the babyface side, has Cody Rhodes, Randy Orton, Jacob Fatu, even though I think he's really more of a tweener right now, Sami Zayn, Damian Priest, Carmelo Hayes, Ilya Dragunov, Rey Fenix, and Shinsuke Nakamura. And on the heel side, we've got Drew McIntyre, Aleister Black, Solo Sikoa, and Trick Williams. So you look at this, and it's pretty bleak on the heel side on SmackDown. I mean, I talked about how bleak it is on the women's side and the women's division on SmackDown, but the heel side on the men's roster is pretty freaking bleak too. They could use another top heel on that show. And if Oba is going to Raw, you know what? Why not send Hobbs to SmackDown? It doesn't even have to be right now. I'm not saying call him up right away, get him on SmackDown next week. They could still send him to NXT for a few months and bring him up after WrestleMania because they're already calling up a lot of people as it is. And unless they really have something good for him at WrestleMania, like there's talk of them already having plans for Oba at Mania. I don't know that Hobbs is coming in with a big Mania match all planned out. So then why not just wait and debut him maybe that Friday after WrestleMania? I mean, we could quibble over the timing of it, but they could really use some help on the heel side on Fridays. With those 3 hours. But again, this is all assuming he ends up in WWE. Nothing is confirmed yet. Nothing is signed. I imagine we'll hear about that this week. And look, it's a loss for Tony Khan, but it's not a huge loss because he wasn't pushing Hobbs in a main event spot. And he has so many people on that roster. It's not like losing Hobbs is going to devastate the company or interrupt any major storylines. But it's a loss in that he's a homegrown guy that it feels like they absolutely could have done more with. It's like I kind of feel the same way about Hobbs in AEW that I did with Jake something in TNA. But it just felt like this is his ceiling and this is probably as high as he's going to go. So in just the first few weeks of the year, Tony has lost, we presume, Chris Jericho, whose deal was set to be up at midnight on New Year's Day, and Powerhouse Hobbs. While Matt Taven, Mercedes Martinez, who has said this will be her final year in the ring, and Alex Abrahantes have all seen their deals expire, but they weren't really being used. But Tony has signed all 4 members of the Rascalz. Per PW Insider, Myron Reed and Desmond Xavier, they were working for TNA without a contract, while TNA had a renewal option on Trey Miguel and Zachary Wentz, but opted not to exercise it, with one theory as to why, being that they were hoping to get them to stay at a different contractual rate. Yeah, a lower one. And when that didn't happen, they hit the open market. So Tony swooped in and grabbed all 4 of them. Like Pokemon. You got to catch them all. Look, all 4 are super talented. They could work that fast-paced, exciting style that we see so much of in AEW, but where they're going to end up remains a question. Now, they debuted on Collision last night in a backstage segment where I think who was it? I forgot who it was, but she knocked on their door. They opened the door, and smoke came out of the room. And then 3 of the Rascalz came out and introduced themselves, all but Trey Miguel. Now, I don't know what's up with Trey Miguel. I'm going to assume it was maybe a travel issue, and that's why maybe he was there, but if he was there, they didn't put him on TV for some reason. So maybe he had a travel issue. My understanding is that all 4 of them have signed. So unless there's something weird going on with Trey Miguel, even though we only saw 3 of them last night, it is supposed to be all 4. And again, all 4 of them are very talented, but where they end up is going to be the question here. Do we see them on Dynamite? Do they mostly stay on Collision and be Collision Cowboys? Does he use them for the Ring of Honor brand? Because it feels to me like something is going on here. Like, if Jericho is gone, that's a lot of money off the books that he would be able to now spend on other people, right? He would have been committed to a lot of money if Jericho would have re-signed, and now all of a sudden, if Jericho is gone, it's probably millions of dollars now that he can use to spend in other ways. And the Rascalz are hardly the only signings that he has made in just the last few weeks. He finally got Andrade under contract, but that just seemed like a formality. He signed Jake something after his TNA deal expired on January 1st. So that's 2 more members of the Callis family right there. He announced that Mascara Dorada and Persephone are now under dual contracts with AEW and CMLL. He signed Hyon and Maya World, who were the beneficiaries of the way that Tegan Nox and Miranda Alizé handled their business with AEW, right? They didn't do themselves any favors. So the other 2 stepped up, and now they've been rewarded for it with contracts. Fightful had reported that Lacey Lane was signed, the former Caden Carter from WWE. This was over a month ago, although she's still not listed on their roster page, and we haven't seen her since. But let's assume she's under contract. They just announced last night after Collision that she got the graphic and everything that Zeta Steele, who was a WWE ID recruit at one time, is now all elite. MJF just announced at the Limitless show the other night that Alec Price and Jordan Oliver have been given AEW contracts. Lena Cross is believed to have signed with AEW. She's a star from Australia. We had her in House of Glory for a match with, this is a while ago, we had her in for a match with Megan Bayne when Megan was our champion, and I was super impressed with the match that they had. So she's a great pickup for their women's division. Like, that's a lot of wrestlers that I just named. You could build a roster just out of the people that he has signed recently. And they still have the same 4 hours of television each week. So, like, what is he going to do with all of these people? That's why I suspect he's going to use a lot of them for Collision and for ROH. But it makes me wonder if he's working on something for Ring of Honor finally, television-wise. Or streaming. But just trying to grow more in 2026. It makes me wonder if there's something going on here and he's kind of getting ready for some kind of big announcement soon. I don't know, because that's a big influx of talent all at once. Even if you account for the names that are no longer under contract, he replaced them and then some. So I just feel like there's something going on there. AEW does not have another pay-per-view until March 15th. That is Revolution in Los Angeles at the Crypto.com Arena, the former Staples Center. Tickets have been on sale for a little over a month now, and they are outpacing what they sold at the same time last year for the same venue by a lot, actually. And that is without any matches announced. So last year at this time, per WrestleTix, they had 5,400 tickets out on a setup of 6,500. An initial setup. That's always expanding, but the initial setup was 6,500. So far, again, this is now 1 year later, same time, they have already got 8,700 tickets out on a setup of 9,700. And that will go up as they open up more sections. So, and now it's a building that can fit over 16,000 for wrestling. They ended up with 11,000 last year. This year, it looks like at this pace, they should be able to clear a good 13 or 14,000 by showtime once they have an actual card announced. Plus whatever they do in walk-up sales on the day of. I don't know what to attribute the increase to, but if you ask MJF, I'm sure he would take credit for it.